Good morning, good, very disgustingly early morning to you all. My name is Tiffany Daniels, and folks, as you guessed it, this is another episode of Spilling Tea. So, we're starting a little bit earlier today because we got quite a bit of news to go over on this channel. But I wanted to first of all go back to that wonderful world. Kill me of the JRC. How the hell do they still exist? Sorry. That's me every day I wake up in the morning. Anyways, just a few short things before we get started. First of all, for this next bunch of videos, we are about to get started, which is an article that is written by Shane Nehemiah JD. You're going to be able to find the link to it in the description box, as well as my video that kicked off this series of videos up to date in regards to the JRC and why we are doing them, and the Shut the Judge Rotenberg Center Down Change.org petition. If you haven't already signed it, please go ahead and do so. Now, folks, as always, when we are discussing the JRC, there are vivid descriptions and sometimes actual video footage that of people with disabilities being tortured and abused by this center. So if you have young children present, please make sure to wear headphones. Also, if I stumble over any words this morning or jumble them, it is 5:15 a.m. I do apologize in advance. As to why I'm wearing a hoodie, I'm well aware it's in the middle of summer, but I am freaking freezing. They like to play freeze out with me, the roommates. So, let's go ahead and get started. Yeah, this article is entitled Inhumane Beyond All Reason. I've never heard a more apt title for an article about the JRC in my life. The torture of autistics and other people with disabilities at the Judge Rotenberg Center. Again, excuse me, folks, this is by Shane Nehemiah, JD. They call what the Judge Rotenberg Center does to people with disabilities treatment. That's why it still happens. We've gone over that before. For over 40 years, JRC has used painful methods of controlling the behavior of autistic people, people with intellectual disabilities, and people with mental illness. You see, folks, they're not just torturing us autistic people. We're talking the other neurodiverse disabilities such as ADHD, dyslexia, what have you, people with anxiety disorder, people with depression, people with various mental illnesses, people with Down syndrome, people with all kinds of disabilities, which makes it that much more disgusting. But moving on, this includes long-term mechanical restraint to a 4-point board, food and sensory deprivation, social isolation, and most infamously, electroshock. It also includes sleep deprivation. You just wanted to add that because I didn't see it in there. Labeling these methods as aversive behavioral modification and even aversive therapy, JRC has not only been allowed to use them on their students, both children and adults, but have actually received approval of parents, state agencies, and courts in doing so. Remember when we went over that with the NCLA yesterday? Because it was called treatment, they're allowed to torture us and do whatever they want with us, and there is nothing we can do about it, and we can't even expect the protection of the courts during this appeal in regards to our private information, because it's all for our own good. Yeah, thank you for stating that, Shane. I appreciate it. JRC follows what in its own administration has called a radical Skinnerian behavioral approach, relying on the principles of operant behavioral conditioning, namely arranging an individual's environment to provide rewards for appropriate or desired behavior and punishment for unacceptable and unwanted behavior, basically treating us like dogs. JRC's founder, Matthew Israel, became fascinated with these principles after taking a class with B.F. Skinner, a pioneer in the field of operant conditioning, and reading his book, a novel called Walden 2, portraying a utopian society that was based on the ideas of behavioral psychology while he was a student at Harvard University. He, in fact, decided that it was his life's mission to create such a utopian community, and to this end worked under B.F. Skinner during the course of his studies. Despite the fact that Skinner's actual research was performed on rats, pigeons, and other animals, Israel, after graduating Harvard, went on to try these concepts to people following his graduation in 1960. So, think about that, folks. What was done to those poor rats, pigeons, and other animals, Matthew Israel decided was okay to apply to human people as long as they were disabled, because who's going to care about us, right? Specifically, in the next decade, he started 2 communities in Boston area that attempted to replicate the society that Skinner had written about in Walden 2, as well as communes like this in cities around the world. Oh, let me rewind that. Told ya, I'm not awake. As well as an organization called the Association for Social Design, which had the aim of creating communes like this in cities across the world. Oh, thank God that never happened. In the following years, however, these efforts fell apart. Thank God. While Israel attributed this to personal conflicts among the people living in the commune, excuse me. Allergies. I don't have an edit button. Others who live in the communes and who were a part of the organization reportedly became disillusioned with his vision, which required them to live their lives correcting one another's behaviors. Well, that's pretty sick. That being said, Israel's time in the communes gave him an experience that contributed significantly to his decision to start a behavioral modification program for children. Specifically, at the Arlington commune, he lived next to a housemate whose 3-year-old daughter, Andrea, engaged in rude and sometimes violent behavior, such as intruding into his room and whacking people over the head with a broom, as well as the more typical childhood behaviors such as screaming and crying. With his housemate's consent, he started to use operant conditioning in order to address these behaviors, rewarding her by giving her treats and going on walks with her when she behaved, but flicking her on the cheek when she cried, acted out, or cried at being punished. What the hell? So apparently he started early. Wow, people cry at being punished. What a concept. Especially children. God forbid children be children, right? After a number of weeks of this, he only had to look at her and shake his head for her to stop doing something. In this way became what he would later call a charming individual. So, in other words, he traumatized her to the point that when she would look at him, she'd stop the behavior so that she wouldn't be abused. And he certainly carried that to even more extremes later, didn't he? Excuse me. Despite the fact that Skinner himself did not support, and in fact actively opposed, the use of punishment as means of behavioral modification, Israel drew upon the methods he had used correcting Andrea's behavior in forming and running the Behavioral Research Institute, which would later become the JRC in 1971. Originally a day school located in Providence, Rhode Island, BRI began with only 2 students, one who was autistic and one who was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Over the next several years, it opened up residential homes for its students in other parts of Rhode Island and eventually in Massachusetts. It also opened up a second facility under the same name in California in 1977. As it has since, the program relied on rewards and punishments for specific target behaviors to the exclusion of psychotropic medication. God forbid medication be introduced that would actually help people without torturing and punishing them for existing. The BRI rewarded students for good behavior with verbal aversives, including things like spanking students with spatulas, giving them hard pinches or muscle squeezes, spraying them in the face with water, and breaking ammonia pellets directly under their noses. The program also involved the use of physical and mechanical restraint on students, both in emergency situations or for punitive purposes. Even at the outset, these punishments were used not only for aggressive and self-injurious behaviors, but in response to harmless ones such as crying and failing to follow directions, which it classified as non-compliant and disruptive, and sometimes bizarrely health dangerous behaviors. The idea behind this general use of punishment, which the JRC uses even now to defend it, is that success in operant conditioning requires that a person's entire environment be altered in order to provide rewards and consequences for behavior, including minor or seemingly harmless ones. In particular, it emphasized and continues to emphasize the need to address so-called antecedent behaviors, or harmless behaviors that it is said could lead to or were an alternate form of target behaviors. So we've gone over this before in some of the other documents. They will punish children for acting like children, for not wanting to take off their coats, causing no harm to anyone, for standing up in class when not asked to, which is harming no one, and could simply just use, like they did in my elementary school, sit down, Tiffany. All it took, I would sit down, and I wasn't punished for standing up. I was simply reminded that I needed to sit down. Okay? I liked to read during recess. All I needed to do was the teacher telling me that they would take time out of my recess, and believe me, that's all it took. But the fact that they would receive hard pinches, muscle pinches, that's horrific. People, that's the lighter side of what these people think is okay. But let's move on. The fact that to this day that they will punish people with even more abuse for simply reacting as anyone would to the abuse they're going through is insane. This guy is insane. Moving forward. Even before BRI began to use electric shock, many opposed its use of aversives. Disability rights advocates argued that its use of aversives constituted abuse in any amount, and that there were other, more humane and community-based alternatives available, even at the time. Amen. Additionally, in 1979, investigators from 2 New York agencies visited BRI as a part of their oversight duties on the behalf of New York students attending the program. It reported it to be the singular most depressing experience that the team members have had. In particular, it noted that students exhibited red skin and scrapes from the BRI's use of corporal punishment, and that they were controlled by the threat of punishment. What is that again, boys and girls? Abuse. Despite these criticisms, professional organizations like the American Psychological Association openly supported BRI's use of aversives. Yet we all know how much the medical model just loves us, saying that treatment providers should have the option of using them to address aggressive and self-injurious behaviors. Yet you all used to think spanking did things too. B.F. Skinner himself, despite his well-known objection to punishment, came out in support of his protege's work, claiming as late as 1987 that some people with severe developmental disabilities who exhibit dangerous behaviors could not be reached by any other method. Again, this is what they like to do. They always assume incompetence. Every time. Every time. Really? So it's okay because you don't think we understand. It's okay to abuse us? Because we gotta teach them they're disabled kids. We gotta teach them with the hand. That's what that says. Disgusting human beings. According to Israel, Skinner's views on the subject were much stronger than that, and that apparently when he had shown Skinner video footage of his working with the BRI students and the type of behavior they engaged in, Skinner responded saying, "I didn't know. These aren't people, they're animals." We're animals now! See, that's why the people at the JRC act as they do. They don't see us as human beings. They don't see us as people, as individuals with rights. They see us as animals who deserve any abuse that they dish out. All right, I'm going to read this last page. This is firing me up here. The BRI's strongest support, however, came from parents of students attending the program. This is how it managed to defeat an attempt by the Massachusetts Office for Children to close it or otherwise stop its aversives. This is what makes it that much more sick. How could you, as a parent, support a program created by a man who does not see your child as a child? I'm just saying. After the OFC, which had licensing and authority over the program, banned further placements of students at the program in the aftermath of a student's death there, BRI and a number of parents whose students attended it brought a series of lawsuits, which eventually ended up before the Chief Justice Ernest Rotenberg of the Bristol County Probate Court in Massachusetts. In response to the BRI's bringing a self-injurious autistic girl before him, Judge Rotenberg ruled in what is called a substantial judgment, curing that the child, who was legally considered unable to make decisions for herself as both a minor and a person with a severe disability, would choose to continue to undergo the aversive program at BRI if she was in the position to do so. She is a damn child. You think we would elect to be treated like animals? You think we would elect to be tortured and abused? Wow. While the litigation continued even after this decision, the parties eventually settled in 1987. The outcome of this was a consent decree, which the OFC bound itself and any other state agency that would have licensing and authority over the BRI's treatment practices to not interfere with the BRI's operations, as long as the program had a court-approved treatment plan for every child on which they wanted to use aversives. This is even more sick. The courts agreed and will mandate this treatment because the courts in Massachusetts also believe that human beings who just happen to have a disability are animals. Keep that in mind. Court approval, according to consent decree, would depend on parental consent, a treatment plan developed by the BRI's clinicians, and the opinions of the oversight committees, and the substituted judgment hearing process that the Judge Rotenberg had used in deciding to order the continued use of aversives on that first autistic child who came before him. It's freaking disgusting. Disgusting. By the way, folks, they have found a way around parental consent for those sane freaking parents who think it's disgusting and wouldn't so much as send a dog there. What they will do is they will have these kids ripped from their parents, put under full conservatorships and appoint a state-appointed conservator who will then keep those kids there against their will. They have no legal right to even so much as oppose it. Yeah, yeah. Think of the Britney situation. It's the same thing, only these court conservators are forcing them to stay at the nightmarish JRC. This attempt at oversight was, and continues to be, insufficient to protect children and adults from misuse of aversives at the program. Thank you! Aversives shouldn't exist in the first place. We're not freaking dogs. Dogs shouldn't even be treated like this. JRC's certifications reports in the recent years have revealed the mandatory oversight committees haven't even been meeting regularly, let alone carrying out proper individualized reviews of treatment plans. Furthermore, both judges hearing the cases and attorneys appointed to represent the interests of the JRC students, independent from their parents or doctors, regularly accept the JRC's proposed treatment plans by default, even in instances where there have been testimony by experts showing that this treatment would be completely unnecessary and inappropriate. Thank you! It's never necessary or appropriate. The results of this is courts approving treatment plans that include the use of aversives and that can be changed to include entirely different behaviors without further approval. That's freaking terrifying. Thank God. Thank God I was not born in Massachusetts. In spite and on top of all this, the mere existence of the consent decree has given the JRC and its use of aversives legitimacy, and worse, enforceability. Not only has JRC been able to market and defend its practices to the public as court approved by individual revised review. Remember when the NCLA was stating that it wasn't commercial? I rest my case. But it also has been able to use it to stop the state of Massachusetts from interfering with their use. In particular, in the 90s, it sued the State Department of MR for making another attempt to ban it from using aversives and to ultimately close it down. God, this is disgusting. The case went all the way to the highest court in Massachusetts, the Supreme Judicial Court, which also sided with the JRC, forcing DMR to pay huge amounts of attorney fees and temporarily lose authority to regulate the program in punishment for what had been found to be contempt of court. God, this is disgusting. Since then, state agencies have been wary to even enforce regulations that the JRC has actively violated, let alone take any more aggressive stand to protect the rights of the JRC students. For instance, when a former JRC staff member attempted to report abuse and neglect of students to a state agency specifically charged with investigating incidents, he was told that they can do nothing since the use of aversives he was reporting were legal. Think about that, what we just read, folks. Matthew Israel and his mentor thinks people like me are animals, and that the only way we can be corrected is through torture and abuse. That's what we deserve. After all, we're not really human to these people. Right? These people are disgusting, and they have their state government there to back them up every step of the way. This is why it has been so hard, in spite of how obviously it is that they are torturing these students for no reason, to get these people closed down. We have been fighting these people for decades, and they just continue to harm and abuse and torture children for daring to breathe while being disabled. It's horrific. like the article said, inhumane beyond all reason. And now we had to get to the point where we had to have the federal government step in to do what the state of Massachusetts doesn't have the balls to do. And now even they're attacking the FDA. Right? Right? The answer is this place needs to be shut down and its building burnt to the ground and its ashes to be scattered across the ocean so that it will never be returned upon Earth again. Its implementers of these crimes need to be prosecuted to the very full extent of the law. They belong in jail cells, not treating disabled kids and adults. But here we have a state government that is bending itself backwards to protect the so-called civil rights of an organization who can't even respect their disabled students' human rights as human beings because they see us as animals. Disgusting, isn't it? This is why I will never, ever, ever stop fighting these bastards. I will haunt everything they do. I will always be there. And I will always be pointing to their atrocities upon humanity. That's what this is, folks. This is crimes against humanity. It really is. This is treatment that comes straight out of concentration camps being perpetuated on vulnerable disabled people, and it is continuing on all the way into 2021. That's what it is. That is what's reality. No matter what the JRC tries to tell you, no matter what their sock puppets, the NCLA, try to tell you. Alright, that's all I got for this morning. We will be revisiting this article tomorrow. I will also be doing a video on the most recent shocking thing from AH. Oh my god, this is going to be quite a morning. So, we don't always get that many views on this channel, and the few that we do get tend to get removed from time to time. So please don't forget to hit that like button, hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time this morning, and as always, folks, we here at Smelling Tea hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.